1. She feels the absence, not the words sometimes. Moment of realization for her. Calmness, once taken for granted, often becomes the loudest absence. And in your stillness, she may come to see that your quiet strength was more meaningful than she ever acknowledged out loud. 4. She remembers the way you made her feel over time. People forget specific words. They forget the exact conversations or even some of the events that happened. But what stays, what lingers the longest is how someone made them feel. You may not have always said the perfect thing or done everything right, but your presence, your way of listening, your consistent support, it left an emotional imprint. You made her feel safe, seen, and accepted without pressure. And that experience doesn't fade easily. Now that you're no longer in her life the way you once were, those emotional memories begin to surface. Not immediately, and not always clearly, but in quiet moments, she feels them. When she hears a song that reminds her of a shared time, when she visits a place you once went together, when she's having a tough day and realizes you're not there to ground her like before. She may not verbalize it, she might not message you or reach out, but inside, there's a shift. The absence creates space for reflection, and in that space, she doesn't remember arguments or small mistakes. She remembers comfort, simplicity, peace. That this kind of emotional memory is powerful. It isn't based on material things or superficial attraction. It's built on the way your presence made her feel better about herself, more stable, more valued, more understood. You never had to convince her with words. Your actions and energy spoke clearly. Now, in your silence, those memories echo louder, not to cause regret, but to remind her of a connection rooted in something deeper. And while she may not say it, she feels it, because long after the noise fades, what lasts is how a person made us feel when the world felt heavy. 5. Your absence created space for reflection. When someone is always around, their presence becomes part of the background. It blends into the rhythm of daily life. Messages, conversations, familiar habits, all of it starts to feel normal. But the moment that presence is removed, something subtle but powerful happens. Space opens up. That space is quiet at first. It doesn't rush in with emotion or drama. It just exists. And within that space, reflection begins. Your absence isn't about proving a point. It's not about punishment or distance for the sake of pride. It's about self-respect. When you stepped back, not in anger, but in peace, you allowed both of you to breathe, to see things from a distance, to feel what was previously unnoticed. She now has time to sit with her own thoughts, uninterrupted. And in those still moments, questions arise. What changed? Why did the connection shift? What role did I play in that? It's during this pause that growth can happen. Sometimes we only truly understand the importance of something when we see it from the outside, when we're no longer immersed in it. And your decision to detach, not emotionally but mentally, quietly creates that mirror. You didn't need to make a statement. Your silence, your removal from the constant rhythm, became the message. A respectful, quiet reminder that your energy is valuable and not to be taken lightly. This space isn't just about distance, it's about clarity. And whether she admits it or not, your absence gave her the room to finally reflect, not just on you, but on herself. And that reflection often says more than any conversation ever could. 6. She notices the emotional balance. You brought. Not all relationships are defined by big moments or dramatic gestures. Often, it's the quiet, consistent emotional balance someone brings that holds everything together. You weren't trying to control or fix her. Your presence simply brought stability. And sometimes, that kind of calm strength only becomes clear after it's gone. She may not have realized it then, but your ability to stay grounded made things easier for both of you. In times of uncertainty, you didn't panic. When tensions rose, you didn't match that energy. You listened more than you spoke. You responded instead of reacting. That balance, rooted in emotional maturity, created a safe space for her. Now that you're no longer present in the same way, she might start to notice that something feels off. The balance is missing. Conversations with others might feel more the emotional safety she once felt might now feel distant. It's not about comparison, it's about inner awareness. You brought something that wasn't loud but deeply impactful. And when that kind of presence is no longer part of her life, it leaves behind a silence that speaks volumes. She might try to move forward quickly, distract herself, or surround herself with others. But emotional balance is not easily replaced. It's not about availability, it's about connection. And when someone offers that kind of depth, their absence highlights what is no longer there. You didn't have to explain it. Your way of being showed it. And now, even without saying a word, she can feel the shift, because balance, once experienced, is not forgotten. 7. Your silence isn't empty. Its powerful silence is often misunderstood. Many see it as absence, indifference, or avoidance. But in truth, silence when intentionally is a form of strength. It speaks in ways words never can. You didn't go silent to be cold or distant. You chose silence to protect your peace, to step back from noise, and to honor your own emotional boundaries. That silence wasn't meant to prove anything. It was a natural response to no longer feeling understood or valued. And now, that silence carries weight. She notices, not because you're trying to make her notice, but because your energy is no longer there. The space where your voice once was your good mornings, your thoughtful replies, your quiet support is now still. And that stillness begins to say something deeper than any long conversation could. Your silence creates contrast. It highlights what was once present. It gives her the chance to reflect, to feel the shift in emotional energy. And that feeling isn't empty, it's instructive. It reveals what may have gone unacknowledged before. The consistency, care, and calm you brought. Silence doesn't chase. It doesn't beg. It doesn't explain itself repeatedly. It simply holds its ground. And in doing so, it often teaches more than words ever could. She may begin to realize that your silence isn't a game, it's your truth. A reflection of self-respect. A quiet sign that you're no longer available in the same way. And that realization can stir something deeper than any reaction could, because real presence is felt most when it's gone. And real silence, it echoes with everything you stood for. 8. You showed her what calm confidence looks like. There's a difference between being loud and being strong, between demanding attention and commanding presence. What you showed her wasn't noise, it was calm confidence. The kind that doesn't need validation, the kind that doesn't waver when emotions run high. You didn't chase approval. You didn't explain yourself over and over. You led with self-awareness, not ego. You were clear in your intentions, firm in your values, and grounded in your actions. That calmness created a sense of safety not only for her, but for yourself. Confidence like that doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't need to win arguments or prove anything. It simply is. And when she was around you, she felt that quiet strength. Maybe she didn't fully appreciate it in the moment. Maybe she took it for granted, assuming it would always be there. But now, in your absence, that contrast becomes clear. She may encounter others who are louder, more reactive, more visibly impressive. But there's a difference between being noticed and being felt. You were felt. Your presence created balance, not by trying to control, but by being fully in control of yourself. That's what true confidence looks like. And it's rare. She may not have said it, but deep down, she felt more stable with you around. Not because you gave her answers, but because your energy wasn't scattered. You didn't seek attention. You gave attention where it mattered. And that left a lasting impression. Even in your silence now, that confidence still speaks. It reminds her that strength doesn't always show up with intensity. Sometimes, it shows up quietly, unshaken, steady. And that's the kind of presence she won't easily forget. 9. You responded with maturity, not emotion. There's a quiet discipline in choosing how you respond, especially when emotions are running high. Most people react out of habit, impulse, or ego. But you didn't. You paused, you thought. You chose maturity over emotional noise. That doesn't mean you were cold or indifferent. It means you understood something deeper, that every situation doesn't require a reaction. Some situations require space, others require silence. And in many cases, restraint is more powerful than any outburst could ever be. She noticed that even if she didn't say it at the time, in moments where others might have raised their voice, you lowered your tone. Where someone else might have argued to be right, you chose to walk away with your peace intact. That wasn't weakness. That was strength, guided by awareness. That your maturity was never about being passive. It was about being in control of yourself. And in doing so, you showed her a kind of emotional stability that is rare. One that doesn't rely on constant conflict or emotional highs and lows to feel alive. Now, in your absence, that kind of composure stands out even more. She may interact with others who react quickly, who speak without thinking, who respond from a place of insecurity. And slowly, she began to understand the difference between reaction and reflection, between noise and clarity. What you offered was clarity. You didn't need to defend your worth with arguments. You didn't need to match anyone's chaos. You remained calm because you knew your value, and you didn't allow temporary emotions to dictate lasting outcomes. That kind of maturity leaves a quiet impression, and it lingers long after you're gone. 10. You never tried to control her. You respected her freedom. One of the deepest forms of respect in any relationship is allowing someone to be who they are without trying to change or control them. You understood that. You never tried to limit her. You didn't monitor her every move or make demands on her time. You gave her space not because you didn't care, but because you trusted her to make her own choices. That kind of trust is rare. It comes from knowing that love doesn't need to be restrictive. It grows when two people feel free, not confined. You never needed to control her actions to feel secure in yourself. You stayed grounded in who you were, stable, centered, and at peace with whatever the outcome might be. And now that you've stepped back, that freedom feels different, not because you took something away, but because your respect was a form of emotional leadership, quiet, steady, and without pressure. When someone feels respected, they feel safe. And when that safety is no longer present, the contrast becomes clear. She may now be surrounded by attention, but attention isn't the same as respect. Being noticed isn't the same as being understood. You offered both, and you did so without needing to control anything. You never tried to own her, you simply valued her. Now, in your silence, that level of trust and maturity stands out. She may realize that you weren't trying to hold her back, you were holding space for her to choose freely. And that kind of freedom, once felt, becomes something deeply missed when it's gone. You were never possessive, you were present, and that presence left a quiet imprint she can still feel, even in your absence. *11. You were a safe place in a loud world, in a world that's constantly rushing, judging, and demanding attention. Being someone's calm is rare. You were that calm. You didn't overwhelm her. You didn't pressure her. You gave her something most people overlook: a feeling of emotional safety. When she was around you, she could breathe. She didn't have to perform, prove, or pretend. Your presence didn't require her to be anyone other than who she already was. You listened without interrupting, gave space without pulling away, and stood still without needing to be the center of attention. That kind of energy is grounding. It's not something people recognize immediately, but they feel it deeply. And when it's gone, the absence becomes unmistakable. Now that you're silent, she may not be able to explain exactly what's missing, but she feels it. The steady support, the quiet understanding, the sense of peace she never had to earn from you. It was just there. It's easy to be drawn to excitement, drama, or temporary attention. But with time, what most people crave isn't noise, rest, not performance, but peace. And you gave her that. You didn't rush to fix her or push her to change. You simply created a space where she felt safe to just be. That kind of presence stays with people. It lingers in memory, especially when life gets overwhelming again. She might meet others who talk louder, try harder, or shine bright. They won't replace the emotional calm you brought into her world. You were her quiet, you were her safety. And now, in your absence, she might realize that in the chaos of everything else, you were the one place where she felt understood without having to ask. 12. You focused on yourself instead of chasing her. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop seeking others to complete you and start investing in yourself. You made that shift. You didn't chase her. You didn't beg for attention. You quietly turned your focus inward toward your own growth, goals, and peace. That choice wasn't made out of anger or pride. It came from understanding that your time, energy, and attention are valuable, and that they should be directed towards something meaningful: your purpose, your principles, your progress. She noticed that, maybe not immediately, but as you pulled back and centered yourself, the energy changed. You weren't trying to win her back through noise. You were elevating silently. And that kind of change doesn't need to be announced. It speaks for itself. Now, in your absence, she may see it more clearly. The version of you that once gave and gave now gives to himself. And that self-focus isn't selfish, it's healthy. Because when you become your own source of stability, you no longer rely on someone else for it. You stopped chasing and started creating. You stopped overthinking and started building. Whether it was your health, your mindset, your craft, Or your PCO chose the path that leads inward, not outward, and in doing so, you became the kind of man who doesn't need to be pursued, but who naturally draws interest through quiet. Self-respect. That shift changes everything. It rewrites the narrative not by trying to be noticed, but by becoming someone worth remembering. And now, as you walk your path with quiet intention, she may feel your absence not as a loss of attention, but as the withdrawal of presence, and that, more than anything, leaves a lasting impact. 13. You didn't argue to prove your worth, you knew something. Most people forget your value doesn't increase when you explain it, and it doesn't decrease when someone doesn't see it. That's why you never argued for your place in her life. You didn't beg to be understood or plead to be chosen. You simply stood firm in who you were. Silence, when used with self-respect, becomes a powerful message. While others might have pushed for attention, you stayed composed. You knew that worth isn't something you convince someone of, it's something you quietly carry. You could have defended yourself. You could have listed all the ways you were right, all the things you did, all the intentions behind your actions. But you didn't, because deep down you understood. If someone can't see your value without you explaining it, they likely won't appreciate it, even if you do. So you chose your peace, you chose your dignity, you chose not to let emotional moments pull you into unnecessary conflict. And in doing so, you revealed a deeper strength, the ability to let go of what isn't aligned without forcing anything. Now, in your absence, that restraint says more than any words could. She may now be surrounded by people who talk endlessly, defend every move, and seek validation at every turn. And in that noise, the silence you left behind becomes louder. You didn't raise your voice, you raised your standards. And as she remembers those moments when you chose quiet over chaos, space over struggle, and grace over argument, she realized you never needed to prove anything. You just needed to be respected. And if that wasn't given, you were willing to walk away without a single word. 14. You let go without bitterness. Letting go is one thing. Letting go without resentment is another. You did the harder thing. You didn't leave with anger in your heart. You didn't carry grudges or seek revenge through silence. You chose to release what no longer aligned with your peace quietly. And with maturity, that kind of ending stays with people, not because you vanished with drama, but because you exited with grace. You didn't speak poorly of her. You didn't try to damage her reputation or remind her of what she lost. You simply stepped away and let your absence speak for itself. In a world that often confuses emotional control with weakness, you proved the opposite. True strength is walking away without needing to win, without needing to make someone feel your pain, without needing to be right. Now, as time passes, that peaceful exit becomes more noticeable. She may look back and realize there were no harsh words, no final attempts to hurt, no messy endings, just space. Space filled with quiet self-respect. People remember how you made them feel, but they also remember how you left. And you left with stillness. That calm detachment can echo louder than any reaction ever could. Because when a man lets go without bitterness, it shows he didn't lose himself in the process. He chose inner balance over emotional warfare. And now, in the quiet that remains, she might begin to feel what your presence really meant, not because you forced her to see it, but because your silence, your calm, and your peace have become impossible to ignore. You left cleanly, and that clarity leaves a mark. 15. You were her mirror, not her judge. You didn't try to control her. You didn't tell her who to be. You didn't lecture or criticize. Instead, you simply reflected her choices back to her through your quiet presence like a mirror. When she acted with kindness, you met it with warmth. When she pulled away, you didn't chase. When her actions didn't align with your values, you didn't argue, you just responded with distance. That response wasn't cold, it was honest, and that honesty is powerful, because it allows someone to see themselves without distortion, without blame, without noise. You weren't there to fix or punish her, you were simply there to respond with truth, calmly and clearly. Many people aren't used to that. They're used to being told what to do or being emotionally pursued. But you offered something different, a reflection. And that's harder to ignore, because over time, we all begin to see ourselves through the people we spend time with. And if that reflection is clear, it can become a turning point. Now that you're gone, she may start to recognize what your silence was really saying. That it wasn't about punishment, it was about boundaries. It wasn't about control, it was about self-respect. You weren't judging her. You were simply showing her, without words, how her actions shaped the space between you. And that quiet truth will stay with her far longer than any argument ever could. In the end, you didn't try to change her. You let her see herself and gave her the freedom to decide what to do with that reflection. And now, your absence reveals even more than your presence once did. Asterisk.